I go through my process, and it's a process that I trust. And what I got for the Minnesota Vikings was them going 9-8. And to me, that feels low based on what I know about their team. They brought in a lot of people I like. And I like I said, I went through my process. I'm like, I got to trust what I'm seeing, even though I feel weird about it. So it does, in my opinion, 9-8 gets them into the playoffs. So they will be the number 6 seed in the NFC, a wild card team. But I want to clarify, I am predicting the Vikings will go 9-8 and make the playoffs. I'm not saying they'll have a horrible year. At least one of those is bound to hit. But I'm not really excited about the Vikings this year. I think they have some limitations. We will talk about that. Now, first of all, the Vikings added a bunch of really good players this year. They added veteran corner Patrick Peterson. They added defensive tackle Sheldon Richardson, D-end Everson Griffin. He's back after a year away in Detroit. He came back home to, school Vikings. We got Everson Griffin back. They also traded for tight end Chris Herndon and center Mason Cole. Mason Cole is not a starter, but he gives them more depth on the offensive line. I would think that will help their football team. You can never hurt having more depth on the offensive line. Now, Danielle Hunter never left, but he did not play really last year due to injury. So he's back. He's a defensive end. He's phenomenal. I'm really excited for Vikings fans who are getting Danielle Hunter back. Now, the Vikings did let 3 starters go. A little bit more than that, but we'll get into the 4th one in a moment. First of all, they let Riley Reif go. He's in Cincinnati. They let Anthony Harris go, a safety. They let tight end Kyle Rudolph go. He's now with the New York Giants. And parting ways with those guys, Riley Reif, Anthony Harris, Kyle Rudolph, probably all the right moves for your football team. You don't want to overpay Kyle Rudolph to not have a good year. Although tight end Irv Smith Jr. got hurt, he's likely out for the year. That was a tough blow. I wonder if it made people pause and go, maybe we should have kept Kyle Rudolph, but they did trade for Chris Herndon. That explains that move. So I'm like, it's a wash in the end. One big weakness on this team is depth in the secondary. If anybody gets hurt, Minnesota's pass defense will suffer. They cut former first-round pick Jeff Gladney in August after he got in trouble. That was a big loss. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. It's a big deal. Now, on offense, I love their running back, Dalvin Cook. Like, chef's kiss, he's phenomenal. He's one of the best in the NFL. He can run the ball well. He can catch passes. He's a great blocker. It is rare to see a running back who's like an elite, phenomenal pass blocker. They have that in Dalvin Cook. He's a stud. Minnesota has 2-star receivers, Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. Now, the offensive line, it's weird. It's a weakness, but I feel good about it. Because Minnesota is trying. They are really trying to build their offensive line. I got to give them credit for that. Center Garrett Bradbury was a first-round pick in 2019. Their left guard, Ezra Cleveland, was a second-round pick in 2020. They also just drafted Christian Darrisaw to be their new left tackle. Now, currently, Rashad Hill is their starting left tackle because Christian Darrisaw is recovering from an injury. But the Vikings offensive line, I don't think they're quite where they need to be yet, but they are making progress. And I think in a year or two, man, when those young guys develop, their early picks in the NFL drafts the last couple of years, when they develop, it could no longer be a question mark for their offensive line. It could eventually be a strength, kind of like where you look at, like New Orleans has a great offensive line. I think eventually you could see Minnesota competing with a team like that where you're like, oh, wow, their offensive line is really, really good. I think the way that the Vikings invested in young players on their offensive line, very, very good. It doesn't happen enough in the NFL. I love the thought process behind what the Vikings are doing. Now, before we talk about the Vikings quarterback, this will be, Kirk Cousins is going to be the one that I think it'll be interesting. I want to talk about the defense first before we do anything else. I have really, really high hopes for this Vikings defense. They have depth. They have veterans. They have some really good players. Danielle Hunter at defensive end. Linebackers Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks. Safety Harrison Smith is on a new contract. They got 2 veteran corners, Rashad Breeland, Patrick Peterson. Just cross your fingers. Just pray that nobody gets hurt in their secondary. That would affect them greatly against Aaron Rodgers. Like, they cannot afford to have guys like Rashad Breeland or Patrick Peterson get hurt. Now, say what you want about Mike Zimmer. A lot of people say that Mike Zimmer might be on the hot seat. And say whatever. Like, I hear the noise. I hear it. I get it. I'm not so sure we should blame him. I'll talk about that in a moment. But the one thing you cannot deny about Mike Zimmer, he is a fantastic defensive coach. Like, if I was a quarterback in the NFL, one of the few guys, I wouldn't want to face Bill Belichick, and I would not want to play against Mike Zimmer's teams. His blitzes are ridiculous. The fact that he has veterans gives him even more power. Like, having veterans is such a good thing for Mike Zimmer, who he needs guys who are smart, who can learn their scheme and do a lot of stuff. I have the Vikings defense looks really, really good. I have very, very high hopes for them. And I really, really respect their head coach, Mike Zimmer. Now, here is the key to the Vikings season. Their quarterback, Kirk Cousins, needs to step the up. And I like him. Seems like a nice dude. I remember rooting for Kirk Cousins at Michigan State. Then in Washington, I was very happy when Kirk got paid, got a big contract, got to go to Minnesota. Finally, a team that believes in him. And the Vikings did believe in him. And I believed in him. And then I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and enough is enough. This year, Kirk has a lot of help. Great running back, star receivers, young offensive line, a great defense. It's time to deliver. Like, I am out of patience. And there's a couple games this year where Kirk Cousins is going to need to play great if they're going to win. Like Week 4 against Cleveland. Both Packers games. They play the Chargers Week 10, at San Francisco Week 12, against Pittsburgh Week 14, the Rams Week 16. And of those really tough games I listed 7 of them. I only have the Minnesota Vikings winning 1 of those 7 games. That's going to make or break their season. And I frankly do not believe in Kirk Cousins to play well enough to win those football games against really good teams. And he can prove me wrong. I have an open mind. In fact, I like Kirk. Like, believe it or not, I think he's awesome. He seems like a good person. I've rooted for him for a long time. But I can put my fandom of him as a person aside and say, look, dude, you got to play better. And so I'm waiting for him to step up. I hope he seizes the moment. I hope he's incredible. But I don't have confidence that he's going to prove me wrong based on the record I came up with for the Minnesota Vikings. I ran down their season, and those tough games, I don't have them winning. Now, the biggest game of the year by far for this Minnesota Vikings franchise is Week 17 at Green Bay. January 2nd, in the cold, on the road at Lambeau Stadium. And that game is going to determine a lot of things for not only the Vikings' playoff fate, but what moves are made next offseason. Do you get rid of the coach, Mike Zimmer? Or maybe that game makes it very clear, hey, Mike Zimmer isn't the problem here. Maybe we'll see, hey, the person who isn't making plays when it needs to happen most might be their quarterback, Kirk Cousins. So does the blame go to Kirk? Does the blame go to the quarterback? Maybe both, maybe neither. I don't know. Maybe they win the game, right? It's very possible. But what I do know is that I have the Vikings going 9-8 and barely making it into the playoffs because their team, like, they got a decent roster. I think they're well coached. And if Kirk Cousins is great this year, they could be even better. But Week 17 at the Green Bay Packers on the road, January 2nd, that is the key game that will tell us a lot about the Minnesota Vikings.